Hey there, it's Kenzie from Details to Enjoy, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made the kits from our November and December size A box. The first thing I always do is sort out the pieces from both of the kits into groups based on the color I'm going to paint them. First, I'm going to be painting with my white. This is Silky White by Behr, and I'm going to be painting one of my inserts, the cup, and the straw with a foam brush. And the best thing to keep in mind when painting is to have very little paint on your brush. Working in multiple thin coats is always going to give you a smoother finish than putting on a lot of paint all at once. While my paint is still wet, I want to go ahead and clear out the lines of the snowflake, so I'm going to be using a tack and then just gently dragging the tack through the line to remove any excess paint. I'm going to repeat that same process for the engraved lines on the straw. Once everything is fully dry, I can go in with a second coat. With white paint, it's typically going to take 2 to 4 coats to get full coverage, and I'm going to make sure to clean out my lines again while the paint is wet. Once I'm done with those pieces, I'm going to move on to color washing my other insert. So for this, I'm going to need a sponge and some water, and I'm going to start off by rehydrating my sponge until it's nice and soft. Then I'm going to use my sponge to get a few drops of water to add into the paint on my tray, and then I'll use the sponge to swirl that around until it is mixed. Now it's time to apply the paint to my insert, and I'm doing this in a swirling motion. The goal of color wash is to have the texture of the MDF show through, so I'm just going to play with how much water versus paint I have in my sponge until I'm happy with the finish. Next, I'm going to be painting my other insert black with a new foam brush, and this is where you really want to make sure that you don't have too much paint on your brush. You don't want any paint pooling up on the actual insert as you're painting. I'm just doing a really thin coat here. I'm not going to be painting the actual lights black, so where the insert gets close to the lights here, I'm just being very careful and using the chisel tip of my foam brush to avoid getting any paint onto the lights. I am painting the top portion of the lights black, so you can see here I'm going down to just where the bulb starts with the black paint. After I finish painting the insert, I'm also going to use the black paint to paint the other pieces and the letters that I wanted to be black. And again, once that's all dry, I'm going to go in with a second coat. Next, I'm going to be painting the lights, and for this I'm using Russian Olive by Behr and Autumn Ridge by Glidden and 2 of the large detail brushes. But before I do that, I notice I have a little bit of black paint on one of my lights, so I'm just going to quickly use a sanding sponge to remove as much of that paint as I can. The detail brushes hold a lot more paint on the surface of the brush versus the foam brushes that absorb it, so you're going to want to make sure that you definitely tap off as much excess as possible so that you're not using too much paint on the lights. You can see here that I got a little bit distracted and made a mistake and painted the wrong light red, so I'm going to go ahead and let that dry and paint the correct light red, and later I will come back in and fix it. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and paint the green lights. I'm also going to use the detail brush to paint the red stripes onto my straw. Now that this has had a chance to dry, I'm going to use a sanding sponge to remove as much of that red paint as I can before I go back in with the green paint. Now that everything has been painted and dried, it is time to give everything a quick sand. There are 2 different ways that we sand. The first is doing a smoothing sand, and this is where I just use the sanding block flat against the surface. The second way is a distressing sand, and this is where you use the sanding block at about a 45-degree angle along the edge of your piece to add a little bit of distressing. You'll want to use a clean sanding block for each color that you do to prevent any cross-contamination between the colors. It is totally up to you whether you want to do a distressing sand, but we do recommend doing at least the smoothing sand because this really elevates your pieces and takes them to the next level. When it came to the lights, I used one side of my block to do the red lights and the other side of my block to do the green lights. After everything has been sanded, you're going to want to use a clean, dry cloth to remove the excess dust. Now it's time to assemble, and I'm going to be starting with my mug. And when you're doing this one, you want to make sure that you have your handle, your mug, and your straw all in place before you glue anything down. And this is going to help you make sure that everything is looking centered together. Then I'm going to use my peel and stick adhesive to attach everything. So I'm just going to remove the protective layer from the back and then press that into place on my insert. Then I'm going to repeat those steps for the straw and the mug, and then once those are stuck down, I'm going to add the rim of the cup to my mug by placing that on top of it and lining it up with the shape underneath. Next, I need to place my Merry & Bright template, and whenever a template has arrows along the bottom, that means that you want to place it along the bottom edge of your insert. Keep in mind that the A inserts are not perfectly square, and you'll want to make sure that you have the correct orientation for your insert before you add any letters. They should be 6 inches wide and 5.5 inches tall, and if you ever have any problems determining which way is the right way, you can always slide it into a frame. It's only going to fit one way. Once I'm happy with the placement of my template, I'm going to go ahead and use the peel and stick adhesive to add all of my letters by just centering them in the cutouts of the template. Finally, I need to add my felt ball marshmallows to my mug, and for this I'm going to be using hot glue. So I'm just adding a little dab of hot glue onto the felt ball and then placing that onto the insert. We're going to be making a little triangle shape with the felt balls with a space under the middle ball. So I'm adding the right one over here, then I'll add the top one, making sure that there's a little space underneath of it. And then finally, we're going to add the final felt ball on top of this little pyramid. You can see here that that fourth felt ball is sitting on top of the others, creating some dimension. And there are both kits done and complete and ready to display in my frames. I can remove the magnetic top and then slide the inserts in. With this one, you're going to put the lights into the front track and the Merry & Bright quote piece into the back track. If you create your own versions of these kits, we would love to see them, so be sure to tag us on your pictures in social media or details to enjoy on Instagram and Facebook.